The sit is resumed. Senator Roberts Odell.
Thank you, Mr. President. And good morning. In her opening speech, the leader of government business made an emphatic point about the certainty of confidence. The certainty of confidence in our Prime Minister, whose leadership has seen the rise of our country again. The certainty of confidence in this country to refocus on success, to take up the call to greatness again. And the certainty of confidence in our economy, in our path, in our future, with the Barbados Labour Party at the helm. And perhaps it is this certainty that has made us complacent. There are those who say the things that we have achieved are no big feat. Ain't nothing. They call the reinvestment in Barbadian youth no great feat. After the previous government made the middle class of this country choose between their own future or that of their children, made the poor have to delay the dream of a better life in favor of just survival. They want us to forget those of us who are still paying back student loans to this day, unable to claim a piece of the rock or to even think about children because that extra money in our paycheck is consumed with paying back student debt that they should never have had to undertake in the first place. They want you to forget. This country was under crippling, unsustainable debt, multiple downgrades, no garbage collection in most of the country, poor bus service, and the last government's only solution was a man named tax. Tax was their best friend. So I can understand why there are those with a full-throated certainty who believed that this government would go down the same road. Because I understand that taxes are a natural part of government, but they do not have to be the only solution. And it is that lack of creativity which I find myself disappointed with. A lack of creativity that sees them campaigning up and down this country with an old cast of characters that look like some stale political dish warmed over with a little chopped parsley and fresh nuts thrown over. But I digress, Mr. President. The people of this country do not have such short memories that we do not remember from whence we came. But as I say, I digress. I have for the last couple of years witnessed a reawakening in the importance of agriculture for some Barbadians in this country. In fact, during the period of COVID, I would argue that a box of vegetables was tantamount to receiving a bouquet of flowers. It was a treasured thing when someone brought you some vegetables from their garden during COVID. You felt good about it. But that period only highlighted the truth about the unhealthy, almost abusive relationship we as Barbadians have with agriculture in this country. I find we've always seemed to have a disconnect in how we think about it, where we constantly decry the high food import bill. We demand that something be done about it. We argue that government must put policies in place, must increase farming, help farmers decrease imports. And yet, most of us treat the situation, as though it is somehow removed from our everyday choices, from our everyday lives. We walk about the supermarket gathering our groceries. Now, if you're like me, you go aisle through aisle, investigating and looking. If you're like others, you have a list and you go point to point to point. This is how much you're spending and you don't care whatever else is available. All policies can contend. I have no argument. and you stand in front of a shelf of carrots, and you automatically choose the foreign ones because they look better or they're a few cents cheaper. And what you will find is that when you get to the checkout, in your cart, there's nothing that is grown in Barbados. There's nothing that's made in Barbados. But you don't play that on your mind. You go ahead, pay for your groceries, play Tetris as you try to fit them into the car. And on the way home, you have a lovely conversation with your child. And you tell them, in some cases, you discourage them from agriculture. Tell them that is backbreaking work. I didn't work all these years for you to be in a field. I don't pay lessons for you to go and play up in dirt. These are the kinds of microaggressions that we teach our children. We discourage them because we do not understand the large earning potential of farming done correctly. We do not understand the green gold that we block them from. And so when we reach home, we unpack the car, we put away the groceries, we have a cup of tea and we read the newspaper and we call our friends. And we talk about how horrible it is that the front page talks about this high food import bill, how something has to be done about it. And yet in all these interactions, we have not recognized that the damage we have done is far greater than any poor policy that the government could have intended, because we have chosen in our everyday actions not to invest in this country's agricultural sector. We have chosen not to be a part of the solution. No, I don't want this to sound as though I'm decrying my fellow Barbadians, because I too can be part of the problem. I wish only to point out that the daily choices we are making are detrimental to agriculture in this country. But yet we are the ones who oftentimes decry the work of the Minister of Agriculture and the ministry. And all I can say is that it's clear to me in the work that has been done in the past 3 to 4 years that the minister and the ministry take the work of reviving agriculture seriously. So I want to give them a sterling round of applause. Because we have had many previous ministers of agriculture. We have had many previous ministers, and we have all heard the stories about how they relate to agriculture in their own way. There are those, allegedly, who upon hearing that they were going to be ministers of agriculture wept, not out of excitement, but out of disrespect that they felt. How could they possibly be given such a paltry ministry? There are others who, allegedly, allowed their ministry to be used as the boogeyman of the public civil service. If you don't behave, I'm going to send you to the Ministry of Agriculture. But I want to attest that this Minister of Agriculture has been both proud and fierce in his defense of his charge, and ably supported by the men and women exceptional in their service in the Ministry of Agriculture. So when I hear about all the things that they are not doing or must do more of, I personally try to take the opportunity to send up a prayer for them, to encourage them, to offer my thanks to these colleagues, because I know that they give of their all to each program and each policy that is given for them to undertake. Anyone who truly understands the business of national development understands that true development involves sowing seeds that you will never see to reap, that only future generations will have the opportunity. And yesterday, my colleague, Senator Brathwaite, spoke about the building blocks of agriculture, about the need for research and development, and the need for the government to put more of the public purse into the agricultural sector. And while I cannot deny that I myself would love to see this happen, I understand, as does he, that our desires must be weighted against the many needs on the public purse, against health, against education, against the social safety net that happens in people empowerment. And so the emphasis must be on the making of the most of the impact on the most dire problems that the agricultural sector faces, of making significant headway in bringing this back to a more productive sector for this country. And one of those dire problems, Mr. President, has been the issue of water. Whether you believe in the idea that we are water scarce or not, I don't want to start up that argument again in this chamber, sir. One of the main issues of farmers is water, getting it, using it, paying for it. In 2022, Prime Minister Motley and this administration recognized the needs of our farmers, especially on the cost factor of paying for water. And hence, as of May 1st, 2022, farmers received a discounted rate for water in this country. But further to this issue, the ministry did not just sit back and say, okay, that solves the problem, let us move on. The ministry has embarked on a creation of reservoirs and ponds across this country for agricultural use. Now, I know that most Barbadians would be confused by this point. I myself felt like water was the sole purview of the BWA. I certainly never had a thought that the Ministry of Agriculture had a part to play in this creation of water sources. However, in working with the BWA, 38 million gallons of farming water capacity was created by the Ministry of Agriculture over the past year, aimed at servicing 227 acres of farming land at Browns Pond, Haggett's, Lears, Bodwins. These projects come to a total of $5 million in reservoir investment costs. 2 of them will also feature PVC systems, and both Lears and Browns Pond will also feature an aquaculture project aimed at domestic fishing sources of tilapia and catfish at Lears and shrimp at Browns Pond. And I, for one, look forward to seeing how this shrimp measures up. But this was not simply an ideology of, all right, throw money at the problem, see if it fixes it. Because the ministry took the time to do the research and the development, creating a technical report on the feasibility of the project, and subsequently, only then, investing the necessary funds for the infrastructure, which should be completed and the project implemented this year. But the ministry's work on water situation for new farmers doesn't just stop there. There was heavy work on the Aquifer Recharge Program, correctly named the National Erosion Control and Aquifer Recharge Program. This saw the completion of 50 wells throughout Barbados to redirect that water that we were losing, which was not making it through our natural filtration systems and into the water supply. And so the ministry has sought water solutions in order for us to reap more success from the already highly successful FEED program. When that program was first announced, there was so much negative chatter. We hear it all the time. Because in Barbados, we have 3 categories of naysayers, in my opinion. There may be more, but 3. That nothing new. Then you have that could never work. And then, of course, my favorite, that ain't enough, you have to do more. And the last is my favorite because it always seems so reasonable. And yet, if you listen to it, you would never embark on any project in this country because it would never be enough, so why start? But in spite of all of this, the project was started, and I'm proud to say, Mr. President, that 881 persons have been trained through that feed program. That 252 persons have been placed on 343 acres of land in this country, sir. That is not a small feat for a country that often does not find persons willing to invest in agriculture, willing to take the step that is necessary to become involved. And while, yes, like most programs, this was impacted by COVID-19, the ministry is diligently working on getting those trained farmers onto water-sourced land. We are not giving them opportunities in one part to only give them problems in another. We are giving them land that we have sourced water to be able to carry out their activities. Because I am happy to say that in the ministry, we do not stop the work when we are faced with adversity. We redouble our efforts. We seek help from other learned colleagues, and we push harder. And so the plans for this upcoming financial year, as represented by these estimates, will see the expansion of the feed program into the AGE program, Accelerated Growth Enhancement. Now, this program is intensely focused, sir. It is focused on attacking the issue of our food import bill, aimed at moving 12 of the 19 identified commodities in the 25 by 2025 category into production, greater production in this country. This initiative by members of CARICOM is aimed at lowering the food import bill by taking a heavy look at our productive sectors, while taking an also equally heavy look at our import list. And it has decided that these 12 commodities, namely broccoli, onions, tomatoes, carrots, lettuce, cantaloupe, celery, cauliflower, pumpkins, watermelon, cabbage, and sweet peppers, all of which represent a collective $17 million we spend every year in importing. So I want to encourage Barbadians that if you buy nothing else local, that you make a concerted effort to buy from this list of items, because you now know exactly how much you could be helping lower our food import bill. It is not being done in blind faith. I've given you the numbers. You know the truth. And to bring this into reality, the ministry is going to bring 328 acres of land back into productive use. I want you to understand how significant that is. One hue and cry we hear all over the country on a continuous basis is about all the agricultural land being used for other purposes. Privately, there are those who take the agricultural land and want to put it into housing or other more productive, in their opinion, sectors. And then there is the cry that the government itself has all this land running to bush. And so I want us to take a moment to understand the significance of moving 328 acres back into productive use in agriculture in this country. You see, I personally hear the hue and cry quite often as it relates to medicinal cannabis and how we will take up productive agricultural land in non-food related items. And I have fought against that concept very, very continuously, but we will get to that matter later. So I want to send a huge congratulations on this product to BADMC and the Minister and Ministry of Agriculture, who simultaneously are attempting to cut our food import bill to put farmers back into targeted cultivation, that we know we can find space for them and to put more land into agricultural use in one fell swoop. And I'm sure all know there are those lined up to call into their favorite calling program to pull down this effort, to wonder why it wasn't done before. But with moderators letting them run amok, but that is quite all right. All of these kinds of contentions have to contend. We are a democracy after all. We must allow these things to happen. But I ask that we see that agriculture is not a matter to be played haphazardly. It is one that involves planning, research and development, sowing the seeds that are necessary if we really want to do something about agriculture in this country. It involves deliberate planning and moving forward. And that brings us to the Barbados-Guyana Food Terminal Project, because there's been a lot said about this project. There have been those who say, well, why are we bothering to gather together with Guyana? We could do this by ourselves. Why are we even engaging in storing these things and attempting to export when we, in some cases, cannot fill our local demand? And I want to say this clearly. Vision is an important thing. Planning is an important thing. Actioning and implementing are important things. This is not about where we are now. This is about where we want to be in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Because development must start somewhere and with someone. And so, the increased production locally and the planned exports and imports regarding the St. Barnabas Accord, of which this project comes from, I am happy to see. But I want to stop there, Mr. President, because I would be betraying one of my first disciplines if I did not take the time to point out the work of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade in bringing about this agreement. If I did not take the time to point out to Barbadians that when you see an agreement such as the St. Barnabas Accords, and I want you to take the time to go on the internet and read the document, see the plans that we have been putting in place for your future. It is not merely the work of one ministry. It is, in fact, the work of multiple ministries, working on understanding our capacity, on our trading and market potentials, and on building relationships. Just because we're all a part of CARICOM does not mean that all relationships are the same. You can't just sign a document and figure, well, that relationship will survive. We have to be continuous. We have to be intentional. We have to reach out across the aisle, see where we can find synergies, and continue to grow. So I want to applaud the work of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. And let us not leave them out when we discuss the transformative nature of the work of the Ministry of Agriculture. So I'm excited to talk about the possibilities of the food terminal, which, once completed, will see 40 containers of food of storage capacity. I will be equipped with a processing and a packaging plant. Arguably, that has been part of what has been missing in the way that we go about agriculture as a whole. An understanding of the sanitary and phytosanitary needs when it comes towards export. Also when it comes towards local consumption. Being able to have a targeted method of dealing with that. And being able to allow smaller farmers to be able to benefit. So I'm happy and contented to seeing it come about. As part of the overall plan, the transshipment between Barbados and the Caribbean community, with plans towards North and South America. The project will continue this year, and I'm told that plans are for groundbreaking within the next 3 months. Mr. President, these estimates also look at animal husbandry, representing not only the expansion of the dairy and cattle industry, through a partnership with Brazil, but also the black belly sheep program, much talked about, much argued about, much conversated all through the halls of Barbados, the highways and byways. This project involves 3 countries, Guyana, Barbados, Suriname. And it is aimed at bringing the population of black belly sheep up to 1 million animals through interbreeding with other species of sheep. But you see, this project can't be just thought of as it relates to agricultural basis. We have to really look at this as it relates to dollars and cents. The Caribbean imports 7,900 tons of mutton to a tune of 48 million US dollars. I had no idea that we like sheep that bad, sir. Absolutely no idea. Mostly out of Australia and New Zealand. But if working together, we 3 countries could close this gap, not only for ourselves, but for the region, why in the world wouldn't we do that, sir? Why wouldn't we use scientific advancement and agricultural innovation to prove that we were capable of meeting our own needs as a region? This project is still in its infancy, as the plan is to export 1,000 sheep, and we have sent 493 so far, with the remainder to go shortly. It will continue with the crossbreeding and multiplying phase into the 2023 financial year. It is a layer upon a layer upon a layer towards looking to address the issues of agriculture and food security in this country. Another layer to that is the Master Butcher program. With the increase in sheep and cow stocks, there must be an increase in the skills in creating the kind of cuts that we import, the kind of cuts that hotels sell at elevated prices to tourists and to locals. And so, we will embark on critical training for the butchers in this country to be able to ensure that no one can say they cannot get an excellent cut of Barbadian lamb or beef. So I'm happy to say that. And I want our hotel and business sector to get on board with that. I want them to recognize that they are part of the solution and to take clear steps towards making sure that they are buying local wherever they can. Now, sir, I'm excited for the next 2 projects because I myself was clueless when I heard the 2 names. Mariculture and apiculture. I admit, I had to look for a dictionary because they had never been taught to me, sir. I did not know. Now, mariculture is defined as an activity involving food production for human consumption. Very generic definition. It is an activity aimed at the growth of aquatic organisms, both plants and animals, cultured in a confined environment, in an aquatic medium. The rest of the definition mentions something called brackish water. I didn't want to go too deeply into that. But essentially, it's raising fish in special cages off the coast. It is an opportunity to be involved in yet another industry, which is not taking up land space, but rather utilizing a resource which we are constantly surrounded by. It is legitimate industries for sir. Before anyone takes to themselves and say, well, why are we raising fish in cages? They're all about the ocean. Fish. It is a legitimate industry that yields 1.1 tons of aquatic animals. As of 2022, it was worth 3.5 billion euros with a big B, sir. A spatial distribution of global mariculture production study by Gage Clausen in 2022 noted that mariculture is a prominent and rapidly growing sector that has the potential to supply relatively low impact, high quality nutrition to millions more people. And hence, the ministry will be embarking on the necessary exploratory work in conjunction with the Ministry of the Environment and National Beautification, including the identification of the best place offshore, reviewing the necessary legal framework and the ecological impacts that will come from the activity. But, sir, some of this research has already been done as it relates to the possible profitability. Researchers at Stanford University of California at Santa Barbara and Florida State University published on the potential of mariculture in the Caribbean, identifying not only that Barbados was an excellent choice, but they also identified the type of fish that we should be growing based on growth rate, market value, and environmental resiliency. So I'm excited by the prospects of that industry, sir. And Godspeed with their investigations and preparation for the opportunity. There is another market, sir. And again, I admit, did not understand the connection between apiculture and beekeeping. It didn't happen to be a word I was familiar with. It is an agro-industry, using the bees to do what they must as micro-manipulators, as masters of turning what may be into what could be. And so, I want to dispel any notion that this is mere hobbyism, sir. Because we in Barbados tend to see new things, well, not new things, but things we're not accustomed to considering an industry as hobbyism. I'm just playing. This is a legitimate industry, sir. And the Ministry of Agriculture has, in fact, trained 366 persons in the past 4 years in the art of beekeeping. But the ministry does not just want to stop there. The intention is to roll out a full national apiculture project in collaboration with the FAO. The size of the honey industry globally is $8.5 billion US dollars, with a big B, billion. As it relates to one of our bigger neighbors, EU, they produce approximately 275 tons of honey, having increased their production over the past 5 years by about 15%. But even then, they do not create enough to service their consumption. They're only at about 60% of self-sufficiency as it relates to honey. And that is not based on arbitrary figures. That is based on the European Union Directorate General of Agriculture and Rural Development. But even if we don't want to take into account the global picture, even if we want to discount the European Union picture, the domestic picture paints enough of an opportunity for us to get involved, more heavily involved, more targeted. £350,000 annually. That is how much Barbados' demand for honey is. However, we spend about $1 million importing, just over $1 million. Currently, there are only approximately 738 hives in all of the country, and they only produce about 15,000 pounds of honey. And hence, there's not only a local industry, there's not only a regional industry, there's an international industry of potential. But even so, the ministry has known this, arguably from documents I could see, from since 2019. They did not just run haphazardly into the situation. They chose instead to work with the FAO to complete a joint study about how Barbados should go about getting into this industry. The Rapid Value Chain Analysis and Upgrading Strategy of Agriculture Value Chain in Barbados was a document that was created out of research and development, out of looking into the industry, out of looking to how we go about it, how we could better go about it, and where we could find opportunities to expand in Barbados. Now, I say all that to say there are still issues with the industry. I'm told that we need to look at having less aggressive queen bees. That is only animal bees, sir, not political ones. And the possible imports, that we need to import more bees in order to be able to grow the industry properly. But I have faith that we will continue to find that opportunity through our research and development and through the coming opportunities. Finally, I want to talk about the research and development of the labs and the innovation centers that are being created over this next year in Barbados. The Tissue Culture Lab is arguably one of the biggest components towards the fight for increased productive sector in agriculture in Barbados. And I'm sure that my colleague, Senator Brathwaite, would agree with me on that point. And the government is spending $15 million, $15 million, in the creation of a state-of-the-art tissue culture lab. This facility is where plants will be replicated from the larger, genetically preferable mother plants, usually grown in chambers for breeding, multiplication, or research. And this is critical to ensuring a pure genetic material free of pest and disease, allowing us to rapidly produce plants of high quality to be able to meet possible export needs for the markets that we are opening up in this country. This is going to help us not only on the points of food security, but food sovereignty as we move forward. There is already plans afoot, once the lab is completed, to use it towards helping us with the sweet potato industry, of which there is a huge UK market. And we are eyeing somewhere towards 100 million in annual revenue, if only we can make sure that this gets up and running and is utilized appropriately. And I am happy to know that we are doing this. And finally, the Barbados Innovation Center for Agriculture. Sounds like a fancy name, and it is. But it's about visioning. You see, this center will have three main features. One will be a fabrication laboratory, a prototyping space to allow the youth of this country, as well as those more seasoned, to be able to work on prototypes, to be used in the agricultural sector, towards digital manufacturing technology. And I hope that we will use the skills and talents of the SJPI in 3D printing to be able to bring this further along. The aim is to help to bridge the digital divide. The reality is, if we want young people to be able to be more invested in agriculture, then we need to talk their talk. We need to be able to show them how all of their natural skills that they have attained growing up in technology can be used towards agriculture and to making it work better. There will also be a display area for a renewed vision in agriculture, teaching our history, visioning our future, helping us to understand. And finally, there is an agricultural extension app, a service area that will teach us about the soil, about the water, about crop management, about collecting and analyzing data and mapping the zones and weather patterns in this country. It's not just about bringing technology into agriculture. It's about making sure that we are using it correctly. It's about making sure that we are understanding how we can see a bigger future and how our youth can no longer consider agricultural a pastime. And now finally, I get to talk to you about something a little radical. Something that we often argue for or against, too much and too little. That is medicinal cannabis. I happily have the opportunity to lead this organization of the Barbados Medicinal Cannabis Licensing Authority, after one of my good colleagues has laid good ground for me to run on. There's a statement often attributed to Winston Churchill, and the gist of it is that you will never reach your destination if you stop to throw rocks at every dog that barks. And so oftentimes I ignore the comments, the asides, the issues that some who I know aren't necessarily interested will speak towards medicinal cannabis. But today I want to speak to those who are genuinely interested, who have serious questions. I want to tell you a bit about what we've been able to do and what we plan to do moving forward. Because when we first brought this legislation and regulations to the two houses, there was lots of discussion in the public. One of my most favorite was we can have zombies in the streets. People can be all doped up. And it may seem ridiculous, but that was a legitimate concern that a very pleasant old lady said to me as she delivered papers to my office. But the reality of the situation is, this government was attempting to bring a viable contributing factor to this economy. This government was attempting to bring a viable medicine proven to help and bring relief to the suffering of Barbadians. And so we had to deal with these issues, these fears, these contentions. And the Barbados Medicinal Cannabis Licensing Authority, the BMCLA, has been working diligently from since inception to ensure that we are creating an industry that is patient-centric, because it's not just about bringing a viable economic opportunity to this country. It is about ensuring that Barbadians have the opportunity to be able to get medicine to improve their quality of life, oftentimes when they're going through the most terrible moments of their life. And so despite all the naysaying, we've centered this authority on training, on research and development, and on being patient-centric. And since then, we have been able to do quite a lot of things. And while there are 2 issued licensees representing 9 approved and 8 issued licenses, there are a further 6 licensees that have been approved and 10 licenses which have been approved. That is progress in this country, in an industry where they said no one would be interested, in an industry where they said we would never be able to make inroads. We are making them, sir. There's a tremendous amount of work that has never stopped, because we wanted to ensure we were going to be a well-regulated industry. And so we went to BNSI to develop the standards that would be necessary to ensure that anyone using cannabis grown in Barbados was using cannabis that was of the highest quality. And therefore, we developed testing standards towards that, sir. From there, we wanted to ensure that Barbadians could have training, because I've heard all of the criticisms that all of the master growers are going to come from overseas and the locals who may have been growing for a long time will not get the opportunity. But I want them to understand this. What is legal in this country is medicinal cannabis. And the growth of such and the use of such on an international level requires that you do so with standards and quality in mind. That you have to have standard operating procedures. The same way I want to know what is in my aspirin, I want to know what is in the medicinal cannabis. What did you fertilize it with? What did you water it with? And that is a question sometimes. How did it come about? What is the pest management system that you have been using? And so, we embarked with the assistance of TVET, with international, regional, and local legacy farmers to create a training program that would give best opportunity to Barbadians who wanted to be involved in that industry. And I'm happy to say that we have finally reached an agreement with one of the major educational institutions in this country, which will be announced in the coming 2 months, to carry out that training for Barbadians, to allow them to be able to understand where the international requirements lie, and to be able to give them a qualification that they can't just use in Barbados, they can't just use in the region, that they can go internationally and be able to present themselves as well-studied, well-learned, and qualified. But beyond that, we didn't just wait until this program was completed. We, in fact, brought in a master grower from Israel to be able to first have a conversation with some of the legacy growers who said they were interested in farming medicinal cannabis in this country. And we took a day for him to be able to impart some critical knowledge about how the international industry works, about what the requirements would be. Beyond that, we are currently in the middle of a cannabis crash course program, which we have offered free of cost in this country to anyone who wanted to log on to be able to impart knowledge. It's a 3-term program, and we will be offering the certification at the end of it to say that you understand what is required in this industry. And I am happy to say that it has not just been well subscribed, it has been oversubscribed, sir. And term 3 of that program, we are working with the University of the West Indies, who in fact has one of their own training programs as it relates to training doctors on the use of medicinal cannabis in the treatment of their patients. Further, we have ensured that we have brought educational programs for locals based on regional partners in cultivation, in manufacturing aspects, and the full value chain of possibilities available to those who want to be involved in the medicinal cannabis industry. And 2023 to 2024 will see us having our first therapeutic facility opened in this country. It will see we already have our first working medicinal cannabis farm up and running. But I want to get to what is arguably one of the biggest criticisms that I often hear about our industry. The license is too expensive. And for some that may be true, but I would argue this, that nowhere in the world are your licenses for a full 5 years. I would argue that I have not seen anywhere else that will allow you to pay on a payment plan. We allow our licensees to give us 60% of the cost of their license upfront and to pay the remainder over the next 3 years. We have been making opportunities wherever we can, but let me break it down for you in dollars and cents. For a Tier 1 license, this is $29,700. On the payment program, you're going to pay $17,820, with the remainder to be paid over 3 years. Now, you can pay that on a yearly basis, which is $3,960, or you can pay that on a monthly basis, which is $330. That's a quartz bill, sir. But we have not stopped there. We have allowed licensees who find themselves small and truly not able to bear the brunt to be able to say we will pre-approve you. So we will tell you that your documentation is good, you have passed the background checks, you can go away with your pre-approval and build your facility. Spend your initial capital into creating the facility that you want. And then come back to us. Then look at how you will pay us. We have made every kind of accommodation that we could at this point in time, but we are not resting on our laurels. We are looking at how we can do more. That is why we have worked so closely with the cooperatives department That is why we have worked so closely with each group of individuals who have said they want to come. We have said if 10 of you have $5,000, that is $50,000. Look at how much more affordable things seem to get, working together. And that is why we have continued to push the point of cooperatives and partnerships, working together. Many hands making light work can also make profit, sir. But further to this, we have been heavy on the educational belt. I have done all that I could, all that my predecessor could, to be able to be in as much spaces as possible to speak about medicinal cannabis, to speak about the industry, to speak about opportunities. We have been invited to many of the regional conferences to discuss medicinal cannabis, to discuss how we as a region could then impact on the global industry. But we've also spoke locally. I myself have committed to spending this year with the NCSA to walk with them at each and every opportunity to speak to Barbadians about the difference between medicinal cannabis and recreational cannabis or use. I have committed to be able to speak wherever I am called to do so for this year, because Barbadians have to understand that this is a viable industry. Take the opportunities when they are coming. Let us find a way to work together to bring about this industry in this country, sir. And so, with all of these projects that the Ministry of Agriculture has been engaged in, with all of this work that has been done, it has not come about except by planning, strategy, and legislative movements. And the Ministry of Agriculture has spent 2022 to 2023 making tremendous moves legislatively. And this chamber has seen it all. We have tussled back and forth on the merits of each of those positions. The Plant Protection Bill, the Animal Disease and Importation Amendment Act, the Animal Health and Veterinary Public Health Bill, and the Protection of Agricultural Products Act. Each has graced these halls. Each has made it through on the merits of the possibilities of what they are intending to create in this country. And I'm happy to say that we again, as the Ministry of Agriculture, will not rest on its laurels, because coming will be the Food Safety Bill, the Scotland District Development Authority, and the Three Houses Spring. All pieces of legislation which will eventually make its way through this chamber in the 2023 to 2024 period. Sir, I know I have tarried long upon your patience, but I felt that it was necessary to applaud the work that has been done by the Ministry of Agriculture and the Minister of Agriculture, who has taken the time to be a proud steward of what has been given to him, of what is truthfully the birthright of Barbadians. And I want to thank each and every one of you and encourage you to buy local. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Senator Reverend Dr. Rogers.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for affording me this opportunity to speak in this chamber. As always, I consider it a distinct honor to stand on the floor of this chamber to participate in the debate on the Appropriations Bill of this great country, to which I'm deeply indebted. I do so also cognizant of the privilege that has been afforded me to be here. I believe my colleagues in this chamber, and indeed in the other place, would readily concur that despite our immeasurable abilities, gifts, and achievements, we're merely 51 of well over 100,000 citizens of this country who can be in these places. For all of them possess the attributes which qualify them to be here. So it is with this deep humility, sir, that I approach this significant undertaking. Permit me just to acknowledge today, the 21st of March, the 22nd of March, those 2 days, usually observed as the vernal equinox, which is the transition from winter to spring. And it holds something special for us liturgically within the church, because I'm sure that those of us who follow the liturgical cycle, the liturgical calendar, will know that the Feast of Easter, which is the greatest feast of the church's year, cannot fall before March 21st. And so the transition of March 21st is usually for us a celebration of the transition from darkness to light, of what is taking place on the outside in a sort of sacramental way we pray to happen within our hearts, that as the sun emerges from the tropic of Capricorn and reaches to the equator as it rises, and the days lengthen and become brighter, so too may your people become more illuminated. It is my hope that through our deliberations in this appropriation bill, that the varied views around this table and from the other place will come together for a common vision of a trajectory for our nation which reflects what is happening on the outside today. A transition from darkness to light, from gloominess of winter to the newness of spring. I believe I can quote John of Damascus in his 6th century hymn in one stanza, which he says, "'Tis the spring of souls today, for Christ has burst his prison, and from 3 days' sleep in death, as the sun has risen, all the winter of our sins, long and dark, is flying from the light of him who brings light and life undying." That's enough on that one, sir. I crave your patience, sir, that you would permit me to craft my presentation within a global context in order to speak to our aspirations in this appropriations bill within that context, conscious that we are not alone in this world. I just want to caption this part of my address as a dying ideal. It's a question. A dying ideal. We debate this appropriation bill against the backdrop of what may possibly be a dying ideal. The current geopolitical and global economic situation and practices have led me to suggest the caption I've chosen. It is my real hope that I'm wrong, Mr. President, but in recent years, there has been very little to convince me otherwise. What is the ideal of which I speak? On October 29, 1945, following the catastrophic events of World War II and the heinous actions that took place within World War II, a League of Nations came together. They came together to form what we now know as the United Nations, outlining 5 main objectives. 1, to maintain international peace and security. To protect human rights. 2. 3, to deliver humanitarian aid. 4, to support sustainable development and climate activity. And 5, to uphold international law. These are all noble objectives, which were meant to bind nations together and to keep our world peaceful. So much so that when the United Nations headquarters was constructed in New York in 1951, they inscribed upon the walls the words of that great Old Testament sage, Isaiah of Jerusalem, Isaiah chapter 2 and verse 4. They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. Brilliant ideal. To cement this ideal, to ground it in reality, to give it some flesh, 4 great nations were designated, in the words of the then United States President Franklin Roosevelt, as a guarantor of peace in the world. They would be referred to as the 4 policemen. These nations were the United States, the United Kingdom, the Soviet Union, and China. The United States, the United Kingdom, the Soviet Union, and China. Let us fast forward to 2023 because we do not have all day. These are the four nations that were charged to maintain international peace and security, to protect human rights, to deliver humanitarian aid, to support sustainable development and climate action, to uphold international law. I pause here to allow these things to soak in for my colleagues. The United States, the United Kingdom, the Soviet Union, and China. And while the Soviet Union has been dismantled, the largest portion of it still exists in our world today. As a nation. And as we gather here, there's a war raging in the Ukraine. What are the policemen doing? In fact, it is one of the major players which made up the four policemen that has been the antagonist in this war. As if that is not enough, these policemen were to support sustainable development and climate action, Mr. President. And we're down here like all other small island states experiencing the effects of climate change. So much so that our meteorological office said yesterday, don't expect any rain, but thank God we had a little something last night. Our Prime Minister has said code red. But would you believe who are on the top of the list in terms of pollution in this world? CO2 emissions. A study in 2017 told us that China in that year released approximately 10 billion tons of CO2 into the atmosphere, number one. And behind it was number two, the United States, with just over 5 billion. What was that? Objective to support sustainable development and climate action? Juvenal, the Roman satirist, writing towards the end of the 1st century and into the 2nd century, raised the question, I may get the Latin wrong, vis custodiete ipsos custodes. Who will guard the guards? But who will guard the guards? Mr. President, the actions I've described, though deleterious in their own right, are minuscule when compared to what I perceive to be a greater danger looming at our very doorstep here in this region and in this country. Here I speak of an ideology that is enveloping our northern neighbor, either by stealth or selective amnesia. Indeed, as I speak to you, sir, today was called to be a day of protest in that which calls itself the land of the free and the home of the brave. I have phrased it that way, sir, because I do not wish to highlight an individual, but rather a growing destructive ideology that is spreading in this so-called land of the free and home of the brave. It is not a new ideology, sir. It is as old as the hills. Modern scholars have referred to it as siege mentality. That term was developed by two Israeli political psychologists, Daniel Bartal and Dikla Antebi, in the 1991 work, when they were trying to find out why does Israel behave the way it does on the world stage. And they identified some traits of siege mentality.
One is the belief that the world is against you. And if something happens, no one will come to your assistance. And so you need to coerce sections of your populace to think in one particular way. It involves othering, the exclusion of members who do not fit in and do not buy into the ideology. It involves the development of a collective identity, tapping into events of the past, good or bad. It involves the silencing of dissenting voices. It involves the silencing and control of the media. It involves the undermining of institutions that would provide checks and balances in the society. It also involves chauvinism, the belief that we are better than anyone else, and we will act unilaterally no matter what is said in this world. We see that playing out in the West Bank and other places, and I'll just highlight a bit of it later on. Sir, as I speak to you, this theory of Daniel Bartel and Dikla Antebi is playing out in Israel, where there seems to be a power grab to control the judiciary. We've seen similar things up north as well. Those of us who understood what it meant would have been horrified by the protests in Charlotte, North Carolina in 2017, which featured the chants, blood and soil. For those who know the history of what blood and soil represents, would have been horrified by that, being shouted in the land of the free and the home of the brave. And we've been able to witness the continuous unraveling of that society in real time on our television. And it is an ideology that is not residing in one particular individual. We see it being embraced, even in their halls where decisions are being made. It is a system. And though all the traits of siege mentality may not present themselves at the same time, it is there. In just the last few days, with a warrant of arrest being issued by the International Criminal Court for one world leader, the president of that place, the land of the free and the home of the brave, was asked about the warrant of arrest, and this is what he had to say, according to the Associated Press. I think it is justified. But the question is that it's not recognizable internationally by us either. But I think it makes a strong point. It is not recognized internationally by us either. Mr. President, the relationship between the United Nations, remember those 4 nations that were supposed to be the police? The relationship between the United Nations and the International Criminal Court was approved by the General Assembly in 2004. I would hope that those 4 are not recognized as policemen in our world still. But they feel so. They certainly cannot be recognized as guarantors of peace. If they are, the experiment has failed. The ideal is dying or dead. Mr. President, it is within that context. It is within the context of this geopolitical morass that our debate of this appropriation bill must be considered. What I've described as our geopolitical situation is a loose arrangement where might is right. And we must be ever mindful that When elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers. When elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers. And the elephants are on edge right now, sir. As I listened to the leader of government business chronicling the era between 1991 and 2018 yesterday, I couldn't help but think of Lord Nelson in that epic calypso, King Lear. But this is not to suggest that the leader of government business was lying, sir. It was just to recount a particular line in that song, where when King Lear was asked to lie about a fisherman, he said, when you talk about fish, you hit the spot. To tell you the truth, believe it or not, I was hoping you would go there. So, when you spoke of 1991 to 2018, as even Senator Drakes said to me yesterday, we sound like we were sharing notes. You hit the spot. When the honourable member spoke about that, she recounted the period buttressed by excerpts of parliamentary speeches from the late Honourable Professor Owen Arthur. And she spoke to the undulating circumstances of that period. And acceptably, we understand they were presented with their slight political slant, as would be expected. But the question is, where have we progressed since 1991? I believe that is the question that Senator Drakes was asking yesterday. In 1994, you can almost predict what speeches will be these days. In 1994, the economy is in shambles. We have to fix this. This is the worst we've seen. In 2008, we did not utilize the period of growth well enough, and therefore the economy has not been restructured. And so we're still in trouble. In 2018, oh, this is the worst we've seen. This is the lost decade. Everything is gone. It is in shambles. In 2023, things are looking up. This is an issue for us, sir. It's a problematic issue for us. I noted that the leader of government business, very erudite, always well-researched, quoted Professor Arthur from 1991 to 2018, and one would assume that he went mute after then. But Mr. Arthur also spoke in 2019. Speaking at the University of the West Indies Global Belt and Road Research Symposium at the Errol Barrow Center for Creative Imagination, reported in the section of the press of January 29, 2018. Mr. Arthur said words to the effect, Barbados essentially gave up a chunk of its sovereignty when it signed on the dotted line to receive the US $290 million loan from the International Monetary Fund. He then went on to say, and I'm quoting from the article, Barbados has recently had to agree on an IMF program, central to which has been the agreement to reduce its debt to GDP ratio, which the leader of government business spoke about yesterday, and to realize the largest primary surpluses of any country in the world. Both of these will take a toll on the well-being of our people. That fiscal consolidation program had to be sanctioned by countries like Japan and Italy, which have the highest debt to GDP ratio of any country in the world, and are not doing anything about it. Under that program, Barbados had to agree that it would not use any restriction or any other devices that can hurt international prosperity as a means of solving our balance of payments problems or to protect its small and medium-sized industry. Yet we too easily forget that in the early stages of their development, the advanced countries of today use protectionist devices to safeguard their domestic enterprises to telling effect. I've highlighted this, sir, not as a critique of what the government has done, because people make choices, but to just reinforce the point that I've been making here, that we need to recognize in this country, where we now exist in a world where there seems to be laws for the Medes and laws for the Persians. And we must be cognizant that the elephants are lining up. The elephants are on edge. And so it is within this context, sir, that I'm really calling for us to build up the type of resilience within which can cushion those exogenous shocks of which Senator Cummings spoke yesterday. And when I say build up resilience within, for us as a people, we have to recognize that resilience will not always come with affluence. It will come with a deep sense of understanding who we are and the determination that though we may not experience the best of conditions now, we will lay the foundations for future generations to do so. It is about sacrifice, Mr. President. And it's beautiful as this appropriation bill is. There needs to be an element within our understanding that we need to develop a national ideology, recognizing that the world outside does not care about us. We have to recognize that the population of Barbados is the size of a small to medium-sized town in the US. They do not see us as we want to see ourselves. And so we have to build resilience from within. How do we do that, sir? We need to develop, I know I'm going to get some trouble for this, but we need to develop an apolitical national strategic plan to which all governments will subscribe. It is nothing new, sir. The great years between 1994 and 2008, a lot of it came on the back of the social partnership that was developed, where people sat down around the table and sought to determine a strategy for the development of this nation, people from all walks of life. We need to do that. We need to have that. I know that she got a lot of trouble yesterday when Senator Drake spoke about our political process, but this is something I've been telling us about for the longest while. I'm going to start. As I've said before, Barbados' greatest strength is its greatest weakness. I had one run already, sir, and I think that's enough for me. Barbados' greatest strength is its greatest weakness. And the great strength we have is that there's really no political divide in this country. Let us not fool ourselves. We can posture and get people out in the night dew when time comes and all that kind of thing. But there's really no political divide. And if you doubt it, just look at the way how political actors move from one side to the other and nestle so comfortably within the bosom of the other side. As I said yesterday, that cannot be considered a side. I can recall, sir, when a leader of a political party in this country moved over to the other side and nestled in its bosom within the space of a week. The new leader which emerged said, I came back because I sensed that both parties were being run from the same place. And I suspect that there are some out there who may say the same of the current dispensation. But I've highlighted this to make the point that that is a strength, but it becomes a weakness when just for political points and one-upmanship, we undermine the very things that can strengthen and build our nation. So when you are in opposition, oh gosh, this is the worst thing that ever happened. And because you've gotten into government by saying it's the worst thing, you can't now pick it up, even though some have. I heard Senator Drake's quote from a speech in Independence Square about an incongruous monolithic monument that was in the shadows, but that incongruous monolithic monument was embraced. I heard another time about a building somewhere in 2 Mile Hill as a white elephant. But within the space of a week, after the change of government, a ministry was in it. You know, and we need to stop. We need to stop. Yes, we really need to stop. And I'm not saying this. I understand that there must be the little political rancor. We must have a little fun and so on. But this current geopolitical climate dictates something different. And this is not about politics and politicians. This is about us as Barbadians realizing that we are in grave danger. We are in grave danger. I became a little concerned just now when Senator Roberts-Odell was talking about apiculture. And she said, we want to put bees all over this country, having described bees as being manipulative. She even went as far as if she wanted to import bees. I became concerned. But for all that took place in the well of Parliament over the past few weeks, one sentiment resonated with me. After the Ministry of Agriculture had made their presentation, the acting permanent secretary said something. It was carried on national television. You know what he said? One of the challenges we face is that every administration comes and changes the scope of the ministry. And what that does, sir, it puts our civil service servants in a position. The apparatus of government is very difficult to turn around. And so when we keep changing things on the whims of fancies of a particular political party, or even someone would say a particular leader, it creates problems for us and our national development. And that was for the Ministry of Agriculture. I would like to hear what happens in other ministries as well. And so I would like us to look at the political culture of our country. It's all right to have our little back and forths and so on, but recognize at the end of the day, a lot of it is posturing, because there's really no ideological divide, none, other than when bees are put in larger numbers in the country. Sir, I wish to... I didn't say anything, sir. So this is really a call for us to come together as Barbadians, all of us, recognizing the challenges that confront us, recognizing the situation in our world at this time, I've said it before in this chamber, and I embrace that totally. I am comfortable living under any administration in this country. You know why? Because I know they've all attended some of the best schools in the world. They've all received some of the highest quality of education in the world. And they're all competent of guiding us. I hold that firmly. But we really need to look at developing a national strategy. Because if we continue with the type of back and forth, up and down, undulating things of the 1991 to 2018 period, this 2023 is a different era. When blood and soil can be shouted as a slogan elsewhere, the very thing that the United Nations was formed to counter is now being espoused on the soil of one of its policemen. We have a problem. And we better recognize it as a problem. Having said all of that, before someone pulls the standing orders, I wish to commend I wish to commend the government on its initiatives in this appropriations bill. I think we have already spoken at length to agriculture when we discussed the resolution from Dr. Brathwaite, and we heard much about agriculture from Senator Honourable Roberts, and they seem to be doing a lot of work there, and I commend you for the work that you're doing. I also wish to commend the Minister of Health and the Ministry for the proposed geriatric hospital. I do not think that anything can be too good for our elderly people. They have literally given their blood, sweat, and tears for this country and deserve to spend their latter years in comfort. And so I look forward to visiting that facility when it's all finished and I go to visit my people. I expect it to be state-of-the-art. $100 million is not $100. I expect it to be state-of-the-art and a place where our elderly can experience comfort and feel that they can live out their lives peacefully in their latter years. In saying that, though, I still have to raise some concerns about our primary care facility in this country. There are too many complaints about what is happening at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. I know it is the period of COVID still. I had to visit the new accident and emergency. One evening around 4 p.m., I had just left here and I went there to see someone. I almost collapsed from the heat of that place. It was extremely hot in the waiting area. And we're using a part of the old Lion's Eye ward as a part of the accident and emergency. When I went to see my friend, he was chucked somewhere in a corridor in that area. It was hot. And the poor nurses and so on, they worked really hard. I asked them for a fan. They said, but there's no plug down here. There's nowhere to plug it in. So here was this person, and you sweltering under those conditions. I think we're better than that. That may be a one-off instance, but I think we're much better than that. I want us to pay some close attention to what is happening at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. It's still our primary care institution. It is still the place to which we will all have to resort. Tertiary care institution, tertiary. It is still the place to which we'll all have to resort if something happens. In the area of sports, sir, I do support the refurbishment of the National Stadium. The National Stadium has brought a lot of joy and has buttressed the economy of Barbados over the years. I remember tournaments like the Shell Caribbean Cup and the Texaco Games. I would like to see those things like that, come back to our country. I remember the cycling. You go there and the wonderful evenings of cycling and so on. We need to get those things back. We need a proper national stadium. I think it will be very difficult to repair a certain part of the track because I used to be a track star back in my days. And I think I ran on a part of it that I think is irreparable at this point in time. I burnt it out, so yeah, I don't know if they'll get it fixed back. But I also support, as I would have in a speech sometime before, the development of our playing fields around this country. I don't know if we need 17 stadia, but what I do know is that we need to diversify the choices that people have in terms of sporting activities. At that time, I would have mentioned things like a rink for the guys with BMX bikes and so on. You know, we can produce an X-game person. We can have, I see roller skating is back now, we need space for that as well. And so different facilities can be catering to different things. We're only 166 square miles. We do not need to replicate the same thing everywhere. What I would call for, just for my peace of mind, and those road angels, that is the ladies who are driving on the road, build somewhere for the boys with those motorcycles, with the wheeling thing. Let them go down there and wheelie their life away. And if we catch them on the road, we lock them up. But give them their space. Give them an outlet. They need that. I mean, they're talented, but when they're pulling up next to you and coming at you with those bikes, it's dangerous. So I would advocate for something like that as well. So maybe we do not need 17 facilities, but we need to strategically look at some of the areas that we can help people to develop new skills and emergent skills. When I was in St. Kitts growing up, skateboarding was a big thing. I see it has come back now. These are all things that young people can get involved in. We can create that kind of space for them. And I would encourage that. So I look forward to the government building out that initiative. There's been much talk, sir, about the 24-hour economy. And here I wish to concur with the sentiments of Senator King. Work needs to be balanced with family life and the development of the family. What we need in this country is productivity. Not necessarily more time. In fact, I believe we can cut some of the time. I would really like to see where work ends at about 3 p.m. and people can go home, pick up their children. Well, they go now anyway to pick up their children. And so the government loses time. You can go pick up your children and go to the beach or something and enjoy what is around us. Because one of the key indicators in terms of the development index is happiness. Happiness. And so there must be this work-life balance with recreation and time spent with family. And while I speak to happiness, sir, it would be remiss of me if I did not mention the passionate speech of the representative for Christchurch South in the other place, where he spoke about at the end of March 31st, there will be some people who will not be so happy in this country. We have to balance things. If we're going to criticize a former government, so I heard, of raising the salary of parliamentarians by 12%, then cutting it by 10, so you get 2 on the top, along with everyone else. We just came in here last year and raised the salaries for ministers and so on, and added some senior ministers. It's optics. It's the optic. And while I welcome the 1,500 that is being offered people, I also wish us to recognize that these people shop at the same supermarkets that the rest of us shop at. It is difficult. I'm just highlighting that. I'm just piggybacking on what is said. But I wish for us, on a more global level, to pay attention to what is happening around us in the world. We cannot operate as we have in the past. I believe I've quoted in here sometime before the words of Johann Henry Richard in 1842 as he stood on the grave of Martin Luther, the great reformer, who had died 300 years before. And Richard said, if we do as our fathers did, we will not do as our fathers did. This time dictates something different. When we look around the world, the elephants are on edge. The policemen have abdicated their duties. It is now a free-for-all. And we must be cognizant of this. With those few words, I thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator Dr. Rogers. Senator Hewitt.
Good morning, sir, and thank you very much for recognizing me and for allowing me the opportunity to make a presentation and representation of my full support of these estimates as they are on behalf of the government, sir. Sir, I want to first begin by acknowledging the preceding contribution from Senator Rogers and to allow him to know through you, sir, that his presentation has resonated with members as far as East Africa who are listening in intently, to the extent that some are inquiring now where it is that my accent sounds so fast and his is more subtle and more understandable. Sir, I also want to continue my presentation by highlighting the most unfortunate circumstance that happens around this time. It's very cyclical, sir, as we begin to debate the estimates following the budget. And it is sometimes when, sir, persons take the opportunity to transform into what might appear to be profit, sir. And rather than give the opportunity for certain presentations to take place before analysis and interpretations and expectations are made, you would think, sir, based on the feedback that I've listened to over the last 2 weeks, even when I was someplace else, and the things that I've heard and seen online, sir, you would think that World War III was about to happen outside the doors of this chamber, sir. You would think that not only the humans, sir, but you would think the animals on this land and the fish surrounding our waters, sir, were all ready to migrate and go to different waters because the worst was about to happen, sir. However, we are here today in the state of relative calm, this wonderful chamber, with these wonderful senators, sir. And contrary to the migration that some would have predicted, we reflect and acknowledge and note that following the budget, sir, flying fish actually went down to the lowest price that it was in a number of years, sir. And you can get them at $25 a pound. Yeah? Sir, that just tells me basically that we have in our existence false political profits. and I wish to say no more on that, sir. No examples. Most recently, sir, yesterday, in fact, I consider the contributions of all members in this Honourable Senate, and I feel it necessary and prudent, sir, for me to shed some light on some aspects of what was presented yesterday so as to add some meat to the matter and some clarity on some specific issues, sir. As it relates to maintenance, the government of Barbados, sir, in my estimation and observation, is fully aware and fully aligned to addressing any issues of maintenance, and it is represented, sir, in these estimates 177 times if you were to count the words maintenance of property falling under account 211. And even though it says maintenance of property, it counts for maintenance of property and equipment, sir. So I do not want to give any impression or allow the impression to be cast that the government of Barbados, sir, does not recognize the importance of maintenance and this specific account line within these estimates, sir. It is well represented. Also, along the line of agriculture, I take note very positively of the input from Senator Bradford as it relates to utilizing technology, which is very critical for our transition, or any transition, not only in agriculture, but any ministry, but particularly agriculture. Senator Bradford touched on using the Internet of Things, if my recollection is clear, using machine learning, he implied that, and using artificial intelligence. I just want to make it elucidly clear to you, sir, and perhaps if the public is listening, they'll benefit from it, sir, that through the office of the Chief Agriculture Officer, I know that a presentation will be made very soon with respect to integrating artificial intelligence, machine learning, and the Internet of Things within agriculture, sir. And I will be specific about it because I don't want to just sound so vague and say we can use it in agriculture. There's something called drip irrigation, sir. Drip irrigation is known to have the effect, or the general effect, of reducing consumption by some 60%, while at the same time increasing the yield, sir, of different vegetables and fruits by 90%, sir. Yeah? What the ministry, through the Chief Agriculture Officer's office, intends to do, sir, is to introduce the Internet of Things and artificial intelligence so that, for example, if you have a tomato that is supposed to receive X amount of drips per day to have an optimum production, the artificial intelligence then implies, sir, that, if it's supposed to get 20 drips per day, currently as it exists, there is not much technology that allows those 20 drips to go to that plant. With artificial intelligence, pre-programming, soil testing, and the understanding of which plant you're applying this to, you can get exactly 20 drips to that plant using the right sensors, sir. And this is the type of technology that the Chief Agriculture Officer has been made aware of as recent as day before, sorry. And I know that she, through her office, is going to look into having some venture to consider, sir. So, sir, the public should note that the ministry is well aware of the utilization of technology, and it is making the right strides to ensure that we can incorporate that into our framework with respect to food security, sir. Sir, also based on comments yesterday, some may have gotten the impression that these estimates that we're discussing today and we discussed yesterday originated in some bookstore created by one single author, and that author might have been situated thousands of miles away from these shores of Barbados, sir. Indeed, the impression might have been given, sir, that these estimates were non-participatory, sir. And rather, what I see, sir, when I reflect on the programs, is a collection of a participatory process, sir, that reflects the changes internally and externally that are happening across Barbados and outside of Barbados, and reflects the changes that we need to adapt to those times as well. Now, what are the estimates, sir? I'm still on the same topic, by the way. The estimates is a reflection of the work plan of the government for the fiscal period. Where do the estimates come from, sir? And I think this is where a lot of the discussion centered yesterday. Sir, outside is hot today. If you don't feel it on your hands, you may feel it on your head, you may feel it on your back, you may feel it on your feet. The body has many inlets, sir, for which you can determine that outside is hot and take the corrective action, sir. Similar to the body, the government, sir, has many sensory locations and inlets to let us know when there are specific concerns, let's say in agriculture, specific concerns in health, specific concerns in education, sir. And let me say that I believe that a lot of those inlets, even though they're constantly changing and constantly updating, that they exist, sir. We have them by way of line ministries and the departments. We have them by way of engaging NGOs and other interest groups, sir. We have them by way of the state-owned enterprises and even their customers, sir, that they engage as well. And we have them, even more recently, by way of initiatives that are not necessarily but bound to the estimates, but initiatives such as the Parish Speak, sir, where ministers, sir, members of parliament went all across this country to engage persons parish by parish to find out exactly what was happening in their parishes. Some of the concerns raised were relatively small, if you want to look at it from budgetary terms. Some of the concerns raised were substantive. And I'm only saying all this to say, sir, that these concerns were noted, they were minuted, and they were also reflected in some of the programs, sir, that we're representing in estimates today. And I would say, sir, that is what you call participatory budgeting. That is a process of participatory budgeting. It would be unfortunate if we were to compare our participatory budgeting process to that of Canada, sir. Canada, which has a budget of $2.2 trillion US, or even compare it to Switzerland, sir, which has a GDP of $800 billion, sir. We're nowhere near there, sir. But to set the tone in terms of the intention of the government and its expansion of its participatory budgeting framework, I'll take us back to 2018, sir, the very first budget of this government. And I will quote from the Honourable Prime Minister where she said, "That is why I have sent a clear message in this presentation this morning that each and every Barbadian shall play their part in the rescue, recovery and rebuild exercise. We have set up an email for persons wanting to share their ideas with the government because we do not believe we are omnipotent or omniscient. We do not believe that we are all-powerful or that we know everything, sir. The email address is ideasforbarbados@barbados.gov.bb, and I shall ensure that this is circulated through the government information services and through social media, sir." Okay. So we basically, sir, started the battling back in 2018, recognizing the need for greater participation, broader participation, and we did it, sir. We noted it, sir. So, sir, despite the high levels of public engagement, some may still prefer to impose the most extreme theoretical framework of public participatory budgeting, which by extension may result in two extreme dilemmas, sir. Okay, thank you. Two major dilemmas, sir. The one major dilemma, which I think is almost a given with the most extreme form of participatory budgeting, is that if you think things are slow today, take it to the extreme and try to engage persons every time you have a situation. Try to engage everyone on equal footing every time you have a situation occur in this country. Imagine to the most extreme, sir, if we had to apply participatory budgeting when COVID came. Then we had to go back to the public to determine, sir, which vaccines to get. We had to go back to the public, sir. We would have to go back to the public to determine if we're going to build a hospital to basically facilitate those patients, sir. Where are we going to build it? That is the participatory budgeting that some may have been given the impression yesterday, sir, that is the ideal situation for Barbados. And I say, sir, that is far from true. The other issue with the participatory budgeting, as it may have been interpreted yesterday, sir, that was proposed, is that sometimes and oftentimes when you use that broad interactive infrastructure, it results in the most popular decision, but not the most critical or strategic decision for the country, not the most relevant one for the country, sir. And it just means, for lack of a better expression, that whichever decision is most popular, which group of persons aggregated comes together and recognize it, that basically you go with that decision, regardless of what is most important. So if everybody believes that it's most important to go on a cruise ship and have a 9-to-5 cruise or whatever hours you go, rather than build the geriatric hospital, sir, participatory budgeting would go the way of that particular direction, sir, just as an example. So essentially, sir, I say that we have been very participatory. If we were not participatory, sir, it would not have been represented through the Barbados Agricultural Society that this government was willing, not only willing, but also provided $2 million, sir, for the Barbados Agricultural Society to establish a revolving fund to service the needs of small farmers, sir. No, we did not go the route of talking to every farmer in this country. We went through a medium that represented them, sir. And I don't want persons to give the impression that because every single farmer, just as a constituent example, did not have a particular say in the estimates, that they were not represented in some way and their concerns were not represented, sir. Sir, it reminds me somewhat, these concerns remind me somewhat of back in 2018, when a participatory process occurred in this country called the elections, and in the constituency of St. Michael West, sir, a non-participatory decision was made absent of the input of stakeholders and constituents, sir, a decision to transition to the office of the leader of opposition, sir. And I am not prepared, sir, in my position to follow any non-participatory process or any non-participatory leader to come in here and represent that to be the best or the ideal situation for the country of Barbados, sir. That is what it was saying. Sir, the meat of the matter is that if not for passing the Animal Protection Act, I would have said, sir, there's more than one way to skin a cat. But I would really say that there are many different ways to represent the inputs of persons across Barbados, and the government of Barbados has those particular outlets to collect information. But sir, now I spent the first 2 minutes of my hour speaking about these particular references from yesterday. I will spend the other 57 minutes and 20 seconds speaking to the issues of resilience and setting vision across the country, sir. Sir, recently I had the pleasure of servicing a client and having a line of sight of what is happening in East Africa. And it is against that backdrop, sir, that I want to speak to resilience. Resilience, sir, when I was out there, I saw remote communities that were populated by very happy persons that lacked some of the things that we in this country and different countries lack, but persons that were very happy. But outside of that, resilience came to the fore when I considered the lack of water in some of these communities, sir. Indeed, those persons who are familiar with the country Kenya may know of the conflicts happening there as a result of the droughts in Kenya, sir. If you even watch it on YouTube, there are situations where farmers have to literally leave their lands because of conflict, because those persons who are coming from areas that are barren, that have no more water, naturally gravitate to the areas that have water, have fields to carry their cattle, and it causes a conflict between the landowners, sir. And in most instances, the farmers have to leave their properties to the persons to come and occupy them. But I also went there, sir, to basically recognize the installation of DC power to communities that never had electricity before, to which the grid is more than 100 miles away. And I think this was a significant achievement. But in terms of conservation and resilient efforts, I want to bring our attention, sir, to the Barbados Water Authority, because much is said about the Barbados Water Authority, and then much more is not said about the Barbados Water Authority in terms of understanding government's position and the position of that institution in taking the government forward within the realm of these estimates, sir. Sir, under the Barbados Water Authority's conservation push, I must recognize and acknowledge the intention to establish the National Water Resources Coordination Group for the country, sir. This is against the backdrop, sir, of there being initiatives with respect to water conservation from the Ministry of Agriculture, as we've just heard, initiatives from the Environmental Protection Department, sir, initiatives even from the BADMC through their programs that allow them to access water from wells. And what the coordination group is intended to do, sir, is to bring everyone to the table, sir, and reflect that need to ensure that we pool our resources reduce the overlap in terms of implementation, and ensure that we can get the best distribution system across Barbados, sir, for the benefit of Barbadians. Sir, I also want to talk about the personal tank program. Now, this is a program that started back in 2017, initiated in 2017, and was enhanced significantly from 2018 onward. The personal tank program is really intended to ensure that we allow those persons who are in vulnerable conditions, sir, to access water and access potable water, sir, within a reasonable time frame and at a reasonable rate, or even free to some extent. What the Barbados Water Authority has done through the Green Climate Fund, it has reshaped the framework in terms of vulnerability, to the extent that it now has a vulnerability reduction assessment that includes the welfare department as well, to identify those persons who are most in need from that section. The framework now also includes persons with disability. It considers gender, sir, because as we know, men need water, but we know females need water as well, and we know that there are particular conditions that would allow for them to be a priority. And also, it prioritizes children as well, sir. Sir, what the country may not necessarily know about this personal tank program is that under the Green Climate Fund, sir, the intention is to have 1,500 portable tank systems at vulnerable households, in addition to 800 homes, sir, that were allocated for retrofitting and rainwater harvesting. What it means, sir, that this is the Barbados Water Authority, but if you allow persons to have access to that water at their homes, and I believe strongly that every household should be informed to some extent, it means that we can also add a level of food security, sir, by way of this Barbados Water Authority personal tank program. Even if you plant 2 or 3 tomatoes or 2 or 3 sweet peppers, sir, you're adding to food security to some extent. The program through the BWA also focuses on 9 portable tank systems at polyclinics, 16 portable tanks and 22 rainwater harvesting systems at primary and secondary schools. 20 community centers will be retrofitted with rainwater harvesting systems, sir. 121 farms, sir, retrofitted with rainwater harvesting systems, and that makes a total of 2,489 solutions and systems that will be implemented through the Green Climate Fund by the implementing partner, the Barbados Water Authority, sir. And those are the types of things that are included in these estimates, sir. Sir, in terms of parishes, I can tell you quite safely that it includes St. Lucie, St. Peter, St. James, St. Andrew, St. Thomas, St. John, St. George, St. Philip, many areas in St. Philip, sir, that have already received these systems. And to date, we've completed 1,115 systems, sir, comprised of 681 portable tank systems and 434 rainwater harvesting systems, sir. And these are some of the things happening at the Barbados Water Authority. Sir, I now turn my attention to the Ministry of Environment, and in particular, I want to focus on 1 or 2 state-owned enterprises, sir. Sir, I believe the discussion around state-owned enterprises has been ongoing for quite a while. I heard one representation of it in the other place as being a necessary burden. Necessary for the reason that, you know, these SOEs cover much of our vital provision, vital services, sir. It could be education, health, environment, water, as I just mentioned, sir. But the burden comes to the extent that we recognize that not all of them really generate excess revenue. I mean, apart from the fact that I stand, sir, to the left of an entity, a CEO of an entity, sir, that has created excess revenue, and she has stewarded that ship extremely well, if I must say. But generally for state-owned enterprises, sir, that is the burden that we face, a burden that was represented to be the tune of over $400 million, sir, in losses, particularly for commercial state-owned enterprises. But it doesn't mean that we're looking to abandon it, sir. But I must make the point in my observation and in my participation over the last 8 months, being chairman of one of these commercial state-owned enterprises, that I believe one of the serious considerations that we must continue to implement is really the gap between the policy, sir, and the operations at state-owned enterprises. Suffice it to say, sir, I recognize in the Public Finance Management Act, there is no recognition of a general manager. there's a recognition of a chief executive officer, sir. And I understand the intent. I understand the intent, sir, when I read the act with respect to bringing policy closer to operations through strategy. And in most cases, we know that a general manager and a CEO position, the positions are quite different, and one represents that need to bring policy closer to operations, sir. And I would say that as much as I appreciate all of the efforts that are ongoing across the SOEs, I really also appreciate the intentions of that act and the intention, sir, to bring policy closer to operations. In terms of the National Conservation Commission, which is another state-owned enterprise, sir, I must say that the vision of the National Conservation Commission has been exposed for many, many times by the Minister of Environment, who has made his position clear in terms of our ability and our need to provide these ecological services across Barbados, sir. What are some of the exciting things that we're going to do? Let me start with maintenance, sir. Maintenance is something that I must emphasize that we have included in the estimate, sir, and we've recognized this in terms of the retrofitting of areas such as Farley Hill, King George, Rockley, Codrington, Browns Beach, Folkestone, Tree Houses, Bath Beach, and Bath Beach, sir. What is going to happen with the National Conservation Commission is that we're also looking to get 2 other grow containers. These are these internal grow containers that control the humidity, exposure to sunlight, sir, and you can grow a host of things without them being exposed to external impediments such as mites and all sorts of stuff, sir. What it means, sir, is that what it means, sir, is that with the introduction of these grow containers, the National Conservation Commission can position itself in a situation that it can meet not only the local demand of customers across Barbados, but with a vision that I believe I have and I believe the Minister shares, the National Conservation Commission can meet the demand of our regional customers, or our customers across this region, sir, to the extent that I believe that Barbados can become the largest exporter of cut flowers across the Eastern Caribbean. Sir, I say this against the backdrop of having discussions with the 5th largest exporter in the world while it was in Kenya, Kenya being the 3rd largest exporter in the world of cut flowers, sir, and roses. And I say this against the backdrop of that individual, sir, having a significant interest in coming to the shores of Barbados, recognizing our stability, recognizing, sir, our governance structure that exists, and recognizing that through Barbados, his organization can service the rest of the Eastern Caribbean, thereby mitigating the risk of increased expenses by bringing flowers from Netherlands through the UK or bringing them from all the way away from Miami, sir. Sir, it is not a commitment of the government, but I can speak based on my discussions, which were not formal engagements on behalf of NCC, that there's a willingness, sir, to invest in Barbados. There's a willingness, sir, to provide all of the technology that we need. There's a willingness to bring patented flowers and roses to Barbados, sir, at 0 cost to Barbados, once specific concessions are made which are reasonable, sir. And doing so, it means, sir, that Barbados becomes the central hub, as I just mentioned, to export flowers and roses across this region. And we can do it, sir. We can do it. So the outline of that engagement, sir, is a direction that I believe state-owned enterprises could also consider. We always think that state-owned enterprises have to continuously become efficient internally, but as Arthur Lewis would have mentioned, there's something called, what do you call it, baby? Arthur, you call me about it? Sorry. Industrialization by invitation, sir. Thank you very much. I thought you were pulling the words from my mouth, that's why. Industrialization by invitation, sir. And I think that direction for state-owned enterprises must also be considered, where we look to partner with external entities, with the technologies, with the processes, with the experience, sir, to bring their knowledge and resources to our entities and expand them while generating a profit, sir. I believe that framework will work. In other models, I hear about the amalgamation, sir, of state-owned enterprises, or the amalgamation of departments and state-owned enterprises. And I believe this is also something to consider, that the government will lay its position when the time is right. But I believe that private-public partnerships can be the way for state-owned enterprises to efficiently transition without running the risk of layoffs or fear-mongering among layoffs as well, sir, because there's plenty of room for that. Sir, I must say and commend the Ministry of Environment and National Beautification, and I don't think that I'm going too far by saying I want to commend the Minister of Environment and National Beautification for what will happen this morning to be the 61st session, if I can call it a session, of the Clean Green Initiative, sir. 61. He's at number 61, sir. And he was making the charge. And while some may not necessarily recognize the importance of this initiative, when you drive across many of the highways and city signs, sir, you get the impression that someone is out there looking to beautify this country. But when you go into some of the communities, sir, like Keys Hill, I went the other day, I went up in Gemswick and St. Philip the other day, sir. Gemswick, in the corner, well, in one of the corners where the buses actually commutes and turns. I remember when I lived in St. Martin's Mangrove, past that corner plenty of times, I had a dump tree on the open space, sir. And there was no space in that particular area in Gemswick, also known as Penny Hole for those who appreciate the local names, for the children to really play. And as a result of the Clean Green Initiative, sir, a remarkable open space has now been presented to the public and laid there, sir, swings, benches, and everything. And for the first time in my life, I've seen children actually playing in the area, sir. And I want persons to recognize that the Clean Green Initiative, it doesn't compete with the parks, but it complements the initiatives of the parks, sir, where structured parks cannot necessarily fit into places. Sometimes you see Clean Green initiatives on land that is sloped one way or the other, and children can play on slopes as well once it's not too dangerous. But it recognizes, sir, that we need open spaces. We need open spaces for our children and our adults, sir, to engage in any recreational activities that they need to engage in, sir. Sir, with respect to the National Conservation Commission again, I must say that during the COVID session, a number of persons have been acknowledged and recognized for their contribution, their efforts. During the COVID session, sir, we have the police force, we have the defense force as well, we have the nurses, of course, and doctors, of course. And I'm proud, sir, to say for the first time, having read a most recent correspondence only yesterday, that this government, sir, has taken the initiative to recognize the efforts of the lifeguards, sir, that have also contributed significantly to the stability and the order of service during COVID as well, sir. I think that is a remarkable achievement, sir. Sir, people don't know, or may not know, that when events such as hurricanes descend upon this country, our lifeguards, sir, are the last to leave the beach. Sir, persons don't know that when you see a lifeguard out there sitting for what appears to be the entire day, that lifeguard is very vigilant and very often glancing left and right across the skim of the ocean to see what activities are happening, sir. And as a result of that, if they don't have the protective eyewear, the glare coming off of the sea from the sun, sir, can be very harmful for them over a period of time. And this is why the National Conservation Commission has always had a policy, or definitely has a policy under my stewardship, sir, to ensure that the proper protective wear is assigned to these lifeguards while that is happening, sir. A number of persons, similar to the perception that some had about the Barbados Defense Force, do not recognize the importance of the lifeguard service, sir, until a serious situation has occurred. And some persons would have said years ago, we don't need a defense force until the prison burned. And you had to call them out to get us back to a state of normalcy, sir. So those persons that think that the lifeguards themselves spend the entire day doing nothing, that is far from true, sir. It is far from true. And that is why I support these estimates, and I support the continuation of the supply of services, sir, to the lifeguard service. I support the continuation of training for the lifeguards as well. And within the next, hopefully the next few months, but it's our intention this year, to extend the range of activities that the lifeguard service can undertake by way of technology and institute the use of drones, sir, particularly for those areas and those beaches that are relatively extensive, sir, so that the lifeguards can have, it will probably be a third eye on situations at any given time, sir. Setting the right protocols in terms of flying over the different areas, particularly even Bay Street, which is a lengthy area, sir. It allows our lifeguards to man the areas in their direct purview, but also go left and right, that would be north and south, up the beach like Bay Street, sir, to see what is going on and monitor it remotely as well. So, sir, I want to again commend the efforts of the lifeguards. As I said, we would have sent our supplementary and received additional support to the tune of $6.4 million for the maintenance and the retrofitting of the facilities of the National Conservation Commission, and that has been ably received and approved, sir. In terms of our tissue culture lab, I recognize that the Ministry of Agriculture has their tissue culture lab. We also have a tissue culture lab, sir. I would not dare compete with my sister ministry, but I would say that we have one of the best in terms of the staff complements for the tissue culture lab, sir. That lab is very strategic to the development of Barbados, sir. It's very strategic, and some persons don't necessarily know what a tissue culture lab really implies. It implies, sir, that when you have situations where the genetic compounds or characteristics of certain plants are under attack, that you can totally isolate your local species, sir. You can isolate your local species and protect them until such a time is deemed as safe for you to repopulate them or reintroduce them into the external environment, sir. The other thing that complements the tissue culture lab that we are still pressing on is the seed bank, sir. I really would wish, honestly, even though I'm in a local estimates debate, I really would wish for this to be taken up at a regional level as well, sir. I believe that we need to establish a seed bank as a matter of urgency, sir. I tried my best to have access to the largest seed bank, which is based in Norway, sir. They restricted my, not restricted my access, they denied me access to come there, sir, because of the strict protocols that they have. But I had the pleasure of speaking to the head of the World Food Bank only on Monday, I believe, sir. Memory serves me right. And he too was in sync with this need to establish seed banks across the world. And he also mentioned that entities such as the largest seed bank in Norway, as much good as they intend to do, and I really believe they intend to do good in terms of ensuring that we have the available species if the worst case scenarios happen. We as a region, sir, and we as a country have to have control of our own species, sir. We have to have control of our own seed banks as well, sir. This is a matter of resilience, not national pride, but resilience, sir. And we have to have a continuous program that merges the seed banks with the germplasm stations and containers, sir, and also with the grow houses. Grow houses are the container labs as well, sir. Sir, I want to say that the National Conservation Commission takes seriously to everything that happens on its beaches, sir. Everything that happens on its beaches. We take seriously to the notifications in terms of animal activity on the beaches, sir, or activities with animals. That is animal and animal, not human and animal. But we take seriously to these things that may be constituted as intrusions on the natural environment, sir. And some of these intrusions, such as the drop-ins from the animals, sir, can have serious health implications on those who commute those beaches, those who go to those beaches, sir. Also, on the matter of beaches, I am proud to announce that the National Conservation Commission has already engaged with Adopt a Kilometre. Adopt a Kilometre will be doing an Adopt a Beach initiative, which, sir, will seek to provide some advertising spaces at the beaches, generate revenue, and have some manner of return from that revenue, sir, will go into the sargassum program, sir. That is the type of engagement, sir, that I'm trying to push and being given the opportunity very easily by the minister to push for the National Conservation Commission, because we recognize that we cannot have growth by internalizing every operation. We need to have external engagement. We need to have private-public partnerships, sir. Sir, that initiative, when first brought to stakeholders, there were some concerns as well, particularly concerns of having these billboards with lights behind them and the impact it would have on the environment, particularly turtles, sir. And we addressed it very swiftly in recognizing that at any given time in the day, once the sun is set, or even before then, that those billboards will be turned off, or they will give a black screen as well, sir, so as not to have any impact on the turtles that may be redirected, similar to what happens down at Rockley, sir. We're also working extensively, sir, with stakeholders across the hospitality sector, particularly restaurants, sir, and we're imploring them, so we're imploring that they really have an uptake of the turtle-friendly light, sir. Yes, I know. We're really imploring, sir. We will continue the engagements with them, even through the Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association. They recognize the need as well to have an environment that matches the levels of enjoyment that the tourists have, but also balance it to protect our ecosystem as well, sir. We also must mention the strategic move, sir, in terms of the management of kiosks. And I think the National Conservation Commission, we recognize the need or the demand, sir, that persons have to participate in the tourism industry. I wish that I had the opportunity in here to showcase the volume, sir, but I can only speak about it. But we have thousands of persons out there that are very much interested in participating in rental of kiosks for the National Conservation Commission, sir. And it's not only a matter of them looking to profiteer, but I think some of them actually really like the particular industry. Some of them are into hospitality, and some of them with even degrees, sir, can see themselves fitting snug into these spaces that we provide so as to add value to our tourism products, sir. And I must say that since I came to the stewardship of that particular entity, sir, we have ensured that the National Conservation Commission and its tenants, particularly starting at Oysins, that we move from this singular perspective of landlord-tenant and we move to one that is more of a partnership, sir. And these are the things that the National Conservation Commission are doing. Suffice it to say, we've also entered engagements a few years ago with Coca-Cola, and we're looking to re-engage also the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. on many initiatives which will roll out in a few months' time as well, sir. And then we're also looking to do some beach access audits to ensure, in alignment to some national issues that we've raised, to ensure that those access points that we are responsible for, sir, that they're not in a derelict state, and that persons can access the beach at those designated points. So I think access to the beach is a very, very important matter that we should never overlook. Sir, I want to add value to the strategy of the Ministry of Environment, the strategy of the Ministry of Transport, and works under which the Barbados Water Authority falls, sir. And I want to ensure the public of Barbados that we, as a government, have taken all steps and all precautions necessary to ensure that what is presented here in these estimates, sir, are not just a budget. They're not created in isolation. They're not created outside of Barbados. And they represent, sir, and I can see a smile is definitely an agreement, sir. I can see that all senators in here may agree, sir, that what we present by way of these estimates is a representation of participatory budgeting, sir. And sir, with those words, I want to say Asante San, which is Swahili for thank you very much. And thank you for the opportunity, sir, for me to add my voice and add my support to these estimates. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Herod. Senator Nurse.
Thank you, Mr. President, for recognizing me to participate in this budget discussion. Mr. President, you know, this budget presentation, along with the estimates of revenue and expenditure has been a bit unusual in some ways. I am not bothered. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't matter to me because as a matter of fact, I've heard it said in the past that really and truly there's no legal requirement anywhere to actually present a budget. But we have come, what is required is to present the estimates of revenue and expenditure. And that is the legal requirement. But our expectation over the years has always been that we hear how, having prepared the estimates, how there's always some excess, either a surplus, no, but not usually. It is more usual that the estimates of revenue and expenditure end up with some deficit, which has to be financed. And the budget very often is used as the instrument for saying, look, we have a financing gap. This is how we will finance it. Growth, or this is how we expect, this is the expectation for financing. A certain level of growth in the economy. Financing through debt. Reduction of expenditures. And so these are the things. We didn't hear a lot in this budget about how that financing gap will be achieved, except that yesterday, I think it was yesterday in the leader of government business presentation, we did get some idea that this is going to be through some level of expectation and growth, and there's going to be financing from the IDB, from Exim Bank, and I believe IDB was mentioned and CDB was mentioned, and of course, the IMF, into which we have entered with a second BERT program, will be providing some of that finance to close the financing gap. So there we are in terms of what we expect. And we are all happy. I am certainly happy that there were no new taxes. I am certainly happy that in terms of the government expenditures, estimated expenditures that were laid, that there is no intention of cutting back either on the expenditures in central government or in terms of the transfers to SOEs and so on. So that is commendable. Of course, we know that the Prime Minister also mentioned that she's in the process of negotiating or discussing, perhaps is the more correct word, with the international business community just now on taxation issues relating, of course, to Pillar 2 requirements of the OECD. So implicit in there may be the suggestion that later in the year, once those negotiations are completed or those discussions, we may very well have to come back and discuss what level of taxation is being contemplated to be imposed on the corporate taxes and so on in Barbados. Because we know that right now the maximum tax level, corporate tax level is 5.5%. If you're going to meet the OECD requirements for which we have already committed and publicly said we will follow and we will fall in line, then you know that at least there has to be some minimum adjustment of the tax, corporate tax rate, to at least 15%. So, you know, we could be talking about 3 times the current, an adjustment 3 times the current tax rate. The point is that that is a source of revenue for the government. And therefore, to the extent that you don't currently have to adjust taxes, there may be some eye down the road that part of that gap could be financed through taxes on the corporate community. Mr. President, as I said, I have no difficulty with most of what has been espoused in the budget. In the budget. I think, as we said, the other area where we may expect to finance that gap, this is approximately $1 billion, as we know. It is just less than that, but let's call it round it at $1 billion. Is growth, and it is growth. And we have heard in the Prime Minister's budget, we have heard areas which sound like new areas for revenue generation. Now, we have been talking around this Senate table from time to time about the need for diversifying the economy. We have spoken to the fact that we cannot all now continue to sit down and leave all our eggs in one and almost in one basket by looking at the tourism sector and the international financial business community to provide the bulk of our revenues. And so therefore, I am glad to see that we are beginning, that there's this recognition by the government that there have to be these new areas for development in order to diversify to some extent our economy. I really hope that these will be areas which will take up. We've heard about, you know, we've heard about the cultural industries. We've heard about the potential to provide significantly increase our gross domestic product. We have to, and so I'm glad to see that the time is coming where now we're not just perhaps talking about things like cultural industries, about filmmaking and the other ideas that were hinted at by the Prime Minister, but that it seems as though we are now getting to the stage where we're seriously going to tackle these issues. And I hope that they will come to fruition in a short period of time. We know that government tends to have this issue of implementation deficit. We talk about something, we talk about an issue, but you know, to get it actually into operation, to actually see the returns from, to see the returns coming from these ideas, it takes too long. It really does, and I think, I certainly hope that with some of the measures which the Prime Minister mentioned in terms of retraining retraining in some cases, but more in training of new young people for management positions in the service, will help to assist and alleviate this issue with our implementation deficit issue. So, I certainly look forward to seeing these new areas of revenue expectations, and that if we can get all of these things in place, it means that really and truly, as this budget demonstrates, we would not have to come here year after year and have to add more taxes or look for levies or whatever you call them to raise additional revenue to close some financing gap. Granted, details and information on these projected projects has been very lean. We really haven't heard a lot about the expectations and so on. But I would think, or I would wish to hope, that in the coming years, we will, and maybe even in this budget debate itself, we will get a hint or more details as to all these issues in terms of how we proceed, how we will proceed on these various issues. The other thing I just wanted to touch on also is the question of recouping or recovering revenue losses which occur in our various revenue departments. The basic departments that generate revenue, the customs department, the Barbados Revenue Authority, and so on, where the revenue is collected, not generated, but the revenue is collected, for example. So I was very interested to see, Mr. President, that the Prime Minister has proposed to introduce a new customs tariff, which is going to be effective, as I understand it, from April the 1st. So I guess we see that legislation coming in in short order. But I also want to applaud in terms of the issue of customs conducting audits to try and reduce the level of shrinkages and so on in the system. So it is proposed that you have audits of the warehouse, of the duty-free and the warehousing systems and so on, which will hopefully which will hopefully reduce the linkage, the loss in tax expenditures in those areas. I'll give you an example. For example, and I've heard it, and I'm sure others in here have heard it, of a leakage. Persons will import a vehicle in parts. It comes in parts, and in a day or two it is on the road as a vehicle. So, it comes in without probably tires and maybe a few other things. And the point is that it gets around the issue, or it avoids the issue of having to pay the level of duties that you would prepare on a vehicle, a completely assembled vehicle that is imported. Now, so and there are all other kinds of arrangements and issues relating to customs, related to valuations and so on of imports and so on. And so that is an area that I think if customs can get it right and can uncover a lot of these issues, a lot of these situations, which is resulting in revenue losses, that you know, you will be in a position to collect more revenue and thereby reducing the losses to government. But so that is an area which I see as an efficiency in moving towards in revenue collection. But I also want, and I believe some other areas that were hinted at, like for example, in the Barbados Water Authority and Queen Elizabeth Hospital, where there's now an incentive to, you know, adjust principle or if they can, if collections can be improved, there's this incentive. There's this incentive. But I think that my point is that we too often we have to come here, and government has to write off outstanding outstanding debts or give some amnesty or something like or something of the sort. And I think a lot of the reasons for this really comes because a lot of work that should be done by the government agencies is really not being done as it should. You know, maybe 3 years ago when we sat, not at this table, where we met in the other place, and millions of dollars in VAT were written off. We cannot continue for our departments to operate like this. And therefore, I believe it is important to ensure that these government departments are doing what they have, not sitting down, as it seems to be the case more often than not these days of sitting down. And if the national insurance is paid in, it is paid in. If an employer pays in, the national insurance is paid in. Or if someone pays their tax, fine, we write a receipt. But there don't seem to be this aspect of vigorously going after people with outstanding debts to ensure that, number one, they don't accumulate to the levels that from time to time you hear they're accumulating. And number two, ensuring that they keep, ensuring that the employers and people, business people and so on, are keeping current with their payments of outstanding national insurance, of outstanding corporate tax, outstanding VAT, and so on. So these are the type of efficiencies that I think will, if we could see improvements, this is how I understand the part of the reasons why we would have to increase our taxes as we move ahead. And just another area of efficiency which I wanted to speak to is in the area of the Auditor General. And Mr. President, we haven't seen an Auditor General's report for 2022 year up to this point. I don't know if it's been done, but certainly I haven't seen it presented. I stand corrected. But the 2022 um, report has not been presented. And I raised that because in the previous report, there were a number of issues raised by the Auditor General. And I would have thought that if we had seen our 2022 report, we would get an understanding of if some or all of those issues that were raised have been fixed. But we don't know. And you will recall there were issues with the Barbados Revenue Authority. There were issues at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And there were issues related to other government departments that impacted significantly on our revenue, our reported revenues. So it is important to see that level of efficiency, to get the Auditor General reports, and moreover, Mr. President, one of the things that bothers me very much is the fact that the Public Accounts Committee has been unable to function, hasn't met since this new parliament started in 2022. Now, we understand the legal issue that the committee is chaired by the leader of the opposition and that we don't have a leader of the opposition. But to my mind, Mr. President, there are some things that I'm sure could be done to get around or make adjustments to the legal requirements so that the Public Accounts Committee can function and do the job for which it is appointed to do. Perhaps I don't think that we necessarily need to wait for the Constitution Review Commission to come up with some recommendation. But certainly it is something that we can discuss because the Public Accounts Committee is a joint committee of Parliament. So the parliamentarians can meet and have a say on it and decide so that this committee, which is so integral, I think, to the governance process, is able to function. Mr. President, there's just a few areas that I would just wish to touch on related to issues that were raised coming out of the budget and the estimates. We heard yesterday, for example, Senator Parris spoke to the new geriatric hospital, which is to be, or for which I understand construction is about to commence. There was and I'm being corrected or advised that it has actually started. And I have no difficulty with a new geriatric hospital. I believe that there have been severe challenges at that hospital in the past in terms of, like all other government buildings, with environmental issues and other issues. And so to the extent that our a new, brand new state-of-the-art facility is going to be constructed for the benefit of our senior citizens, I certainly welcome the initiative. But there's one issue Mr. President, which I wish to touch on. And it is the environmental issues. We heard, I said Paris yesterday, and it didn't seem as though it's a big issue. And I'm speaking specifically, she spoke specifically to the issue of possible noise pollution in the area. And that hopefully this would be alleviated or covered or taken into account during the construction of the project. But, you know, it is, and it cannot be poo-pooed away as not a significant or issue, because right next door, as we know, the National Botanical Gardens now is a...
A point of order.
Senator Walker.
The Honourable
What's your point of order?
Speaking about the possible issues, environmental issues, so I'd like to inform him that an environmental impact assessment was done. It was open to the public. Those issues were raised and are being addressed in the construction, okay, as it relates to the noise and the possible emissions. Thank you.
Well, I
Thank you, Senator
am
Walker.
grateful to the minister for that update, because at the town hall meeting on the discussion of the hospital, it was stated then that the environmental impact assessment had not yet been done.
It has.
And since then, we didn't hear anything about it. So John Public was not in a position to determine whether or not it was done. And that is the issue that I was really seeking to raise. And that is important because in the whole planning process, the presentation of the environmental impact assessment is supposed to be issued to the public and available to the public for assessment and discussion before any project is implemented. That is the requirement.
Thank you, Mr. President. But this was done. The process was done. It was available for the public to make comments on. There were a number of meetings that were held by Zoom. Perhaps the honourable member wasn't focused enough. He was more focused on the town hall meeting and not the EIA.
Senator Nurse.
So was the study available at the town hall meeting? Why were we told that it was not? Why were we told that the study had not yet been done then? But the point is, this is the type of confusion that we get. We don't know, now we hear it is done, and so on. But I accept the minister's explanation that it is now available.
On a point of order, Mr. President, sir. Thank you very much. I think that the honourable member is misleading the House by seeking to imply that there was only one possible forum in which the information could be accessed. So that if you did not turn up at this magical town hall meeting, that somehow it became a national secret. The reality is that at the time of the town hall meeting, the process was not complete. Since then, the information, the process was completed. I understand. My information is that EIAs and SIAs were done. They are available for the public to access. If they would take their mind away from the town hall meeting and go to the places where where the information is accessible. There have also been Zoom meetings, consultations via Zoom, consultation across sectors, consultations with stakeholders to address the issue. So the focus on the town hall meeting is a mispointing of the public to where the information is and was available, and an attempt to persuade that that was the only possible source or avenue for making information available to the public.
Thank you, Senator Thompson. Senator Nurse.
So I am led to understanding
That you need to
That-
get up out your bed more often and go to other places.
Mr. President, I would really wish if I not be interrupted unnecessarily.
Oh, but if I speak, it is necessary.
But the point is that what I'm hearing is that since the town hall meeting, this assessment has been done and it is available. I still don't know, but I can check, I will check the results and that, and I will check the report.
It's the big event of his life.
But there's another issue, Mr. President, in relating to all of this as well. And perhaps the more significant issue for me is that this hospital is being constructed in what is a Zone 1 area. Now, sometime ago, we were understanding that.
On a point of order, Mr.
Senator
President.
Thompson. What's your point of order?
Sir, the honourable member is misleading the House, the chamber. In the first set of information, we learned that the honourable member got a visa, went out to a town hall meeting, and therefore excited about that one event. And now we're being told that the construction is taking place in Zone 1. Mr. President, sir, honourable members will recall that the rezoning procedures for lands all across Barbados, particularly in that central zone, which was a very important one, and lands in the north of Barbados, came before this chamber. There was a debate, there was a discussion, and this particular parcel of land was taken out of Zone 1. It is therefore completely false to say to the chamber and to the public by extension that this is being constructed on lands that are in Zone 1. It is not being constructed on lands that are in Zone 1, and all who were present in the chamber, like those who were present at the town hall meeting, should be aware, cognizant, and have it in memory, sir. Because my concern is that when things are said in here, the press captures them and repeats them as fact, irrespective of how incorrect they are. We had several instances yesterday, some perhaps deliberate and some accidental, about whether there are not provision for repairs and maintenance in the estimates, whether or not there is provision.
No need to revisit those, Senator Thompson.
Anyway, sir, but my point, the land is not in Zone 1, and that must not go to the public.
Thank you for that correction, Senator Thompson. Senator Nurse.
Mr. President, the area of which we speak is such a sensitive area, particularly for our water resources and so on, that I'm not sure whether you can legislate out the sensitivity of that area by removing the area from being Zone 1 and rezoning it. In other words, the point is we still have to deal with all of those sensitive issues in that area relating to the fact that the Bell pumping station is right next door to where this construction is going to happen. And so, Mr. President,
Mr. President, the honourable
I
member
would
is-
like, all I'm asking for,
I'm on my feet.
Senator, I want you to raise Senator Thompson.
Rise on a point of order, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
In suggesting that we are legislating or seeking to legislate away on, and by so doing ignore the sensitivity of the area, the honourable member is suggesting that the technical consultations and expert advice and all of the work that was done by the civil servants of this country and others to determine which parcels of land should and should not come out of Zone 1. He is relegating it to nothingness and suggesting that only he or some group like him has sensitivity. That is a matter that was carefully considered because it involves the protection of the water resources of this country. Areas were not taken out of Zone 1 without work or thought, so that the sensitivities of the area have been well taken into account and addressed by experts, not by accountants.
Thank you, Senator Thompson.
well, I certainly am thankful and grateful that all of those considerations have been taken into account and that there will be no issues, no environmental issues resulting from the construction of that geriatric hospital as it goes ahead. So I wanted, and we all now hear that those matters have been addressed and satisfactorily mitigated, Mr. President.
It came in here, you could have argued so very well.
Let me move on, Mr. President.
Good idea.
While Senator Thompson continues to beat up herself
A little self-flagellation.
on issues which we, the public, did not or were not aware had been addressed.
It wasn't here, it came in here. It's just you.
Let me move on, Mr. President, to agriculture. And there are two little things I just wanted to raise. We have been hearing quite a bit within recent times about the issues with feed prices in the sector. The fact that the producer, the local producer of feeds has indicated that the price will be increased from a particular date. And remember, I think it was sometime last year where this issue surfaced again and government came in and provided a level of subsidy. So we're back to this issue again, and I am concerned because the livestock industry, particularly the poultry industry, has been built up over a number of years. Significant capital expenditure has been put into the sector. And I really don't want that this significant issue, because it's a significant issue. Feed is a significant input, as we all know, in the industry. And I really wouldn't like to think that this issue of feed and feed prices somehow causes the industry to start to regress, and that small farmers particularly have to drop out of the industry because they can't because the costs are too high and it no longer becomes profitable. The point I want to raise, though, Mr. President, is that I think there has to be a long-term solution to this issue. We cannot longer, I think, continue to allow a feed manufacturer with no competition locally to be able to force the prices on these farmers in this way all of the time. The point is, we probably need some competition now in the area of feed production. Maybe the time has come, Mr. President, for government, through the BADMC or some other industries, to look at seeing how we can have some competition in that area so that farmers can be faced with a more competitive price and therefore ensure that an industry which we have developed, the industry which has developed over so many years, and we have seen the country become self-sufficient in poultry production and other meat production, that we do not allow this all now to the West because of this issue. So I look forward to hearing at some time.
Mr. President, I rise on a point of elucidation. I am not beating up myself or Senator Nurse. I do, however, want to be very clear, and I wouldn't want it to go out there that the government has a responsibility to intervene in private sector enterprise. There is an active push for private sector partners who have approached the government and are seeking the various permissions to be able to come into the space and to provide the kind of market-led competition of which you speak. I am not certain, however, that I would wish it to be that it is a government state responsibility, that is the market, to attempt to regulate itself.
Thank you, Senator Cummings.
And Mr. President, these are the sort of assurances that we are seeking to have, that this is a problem which government is vigorously addressing, and that it is not a back burner or put on the side as other issues are being contemplated. The other issue I just wanted to raise in this area is that I noted, I believe it would have been in the other place when the estimates were being debated, that there was a suggestion or a hint that government was looking to get out of the sugar, the industry, and they're more looking to hand it back, as it were. Those may not be the exact words, so please, senators, don't jump up to tell me exactly what was said. But the point is, the point is, Mr. President, the point is that that seems to be government's position, to hand it back over primarily for private sector participation. I am skeptical, if you want to call it that, Mr. President, because I am not sure in my mind that an industry which the government has not been able to successfully run or make it profitable, that a private sector entity will want to take that over unless there are some assurances. And, you know, assurances can come in various ways, but really, truly, at the end of the day, it may be that you still end up having to subsidize or to give incentives or something in some other way. And so that's all, that's what I'm looking at, that's what I'm thinking, and I'm looking to hear from others how government will seek to do this transfer so that it works out as a win-win for government and for the private sector if it is handed back over to the private sector. So that is the other area that I just wanted to speak on. Mr. President, there are a few other little issues which I just wanted to raise as well. And these areas are the issues relating to senior citizens. And I believe I am at the stage now where I'm getting to be part of that cohort. So I probably have a vested interest here. But it's just a simple thing. And it really is this, that the Barbados Association of Retired Persons, of which I am a member and of which I used to be a director on the board, had petitioned the Ministry of Transport and Works for right now, Mr. President, once you reach the age of 70, every year you have to go into the ministry, to the licensing authority, and have your license renewed. And, at 70, most people are still very active, physically and otherwise. And when you think about what is the situation around the world, there's really no limit, a 70-year limit requirement that you have to, from thereafter, you have to have a renewal of your license, your driver's license, every year. And in fact, I know that there was publicly statements made by the then minister in that area to the effect that they would look favorably at, or and that in fact the words more specifically was that Cabinet has approved that the age requirement for a certificate would be moved from 70 to 75. From 75 to 85, you would only be required to have a certificate for renewal of your license every 2 years. And thereafter, when you reach the age of 85, it would then become a requirement for such a renewal every year. And so I'm just pleading because it's a bit of a burden. At that age, we know what it is like to have to deal with that particular department. And so anything to aid the senior citizens in that department, or into seeing that bit of legislation or amendment to the Road Traffic Act done, would certainly be appreciated by your senior citizens. Mr. President, the other area which I wanted to just also briefly discuss, and this is an issue that has come up in the past, so it's not anything new, but I just want to keep it on the table, and that is in terms of the issue of double tax on pensions. We know what has happened in terms of persons who have tried to have their own private pensions put in place. And you were allowed a tax concession you could claim for saving towards your retirement. This was removed, this benefit was removed, I think it was round about probably 2014, 2015, I don't remember the timing, but it was removed. So you have people now effectively saving, you have for the retirement out of post-tax income, but then when it is paid as a pension, they're being taxed. So there's that issue of double taxation. It has been raised in the past, and I really think that the time has come for the government to have a look at it again and in some way assist the elderly in this area. The other thing I would just briefly like to touch on, and it certainly is to congratulate the government on the proposal to have legislation, if necessary, if required, in place by the beginning of 2024 for reverse mortgages to be in place. This is an issue that BARP itself has been pushing for quite a while, and therefore to the extent that government is now acting upon it, we really appreciate it. I don't know, the whole issue there, of course, is that many senior citizens have significant capital tied up in the properties, in properties and so on, which either they live in or they are rented out. But the point is that because of how the systems, the banking systems and so on currently work, it is difficult to be able to unlock that capital which is there and which would afford the older people who usually have a challenge, most of the elderly who would have a challenge in terms of cash flow. And so to be able to put that legislation in place and unlock that capital which is tied up, it will certainly be beneficial to that group, particularly by providing them with that additional cash flow. And there's one other issue, sort of related in this whole area, Mr. President, and it has to do with the care of the elderly. We know what is the situation now where most of our, if we look at the pyramid, or we look at the structure of the persons in the various age groups. In fact, I said a pyramid, it's now really not more a pyramid, it's more like a mushroom, because persons 60 and over are really now the largest, beginning to constitute the largest cohort of that structure. And what is happening is that as people get older, we know that the issues related to dementia, and that really for those persons who are providing care, the caregivers, it can be an extremely stressful on them. You devote most of your time, you devote most of your resources. You really, if, I don't know if any of you around the table have been in that situation where you were caring for the elderly, but it is a real big burden. And, you know, there are options. Of course, you can, you know, there are homes, senior citizens homes, and so on. But there's no better care. The social workers and the psychologists and so on will tell you there's no better care than being able to have that care provided in the comfort of a family surrounding. But it is costly, as I said, in terms of the health of the caregivers, in terms of providing the health issues of those persons, in terms of maybe providing part-time nursing care, and so on. Now, I know that government does provide through, I believe it is the home health, the home health under the, correct. And I really would like to suggest, if there's any more that can be done in terms of being able to see these persons with the issues, the old age issues, being made any more comfortable. And you probably wonder, why am I raising this? It is an issue that hit home to me within, you know, a few months ago, last year. And I recognize how much of a challenge it is for families providing for such persons. And I really wish that this is an area that the social services can look at and see what more or how else they can make it much more comfortable for such persons. And all of us around this table at some time are going to be faced with those challenges. You know, Mr. President, I believe in the other place, the issue was raised as well about the number of persons that are abandoned at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, the number of elderly persons. And sometimes I have to wonder if it is really, should we be seeing these people as unkind or uncaring, or whether some of these issues are so overwhelming the caregivers that they see that the only way out may be to, you know, leave them in the hospital. At least you know there will be some level of care provided there. But definitely that is not the way we wish, that is not, we as a country, I would think, would wish to go. And so, therefore, I am just suggesting that a little more, some more thought be given to that area, and whatever else that can be done, we do so to strengthen the services supplied in that area. Mr. President, As I said, I really have no significant issues with the budget. I certainly am happy to see that I don't have any more taxes to pay. I'm certainly happy to see that there's going to be some repayment of the Series B bonds, some early repayment, I should say. And and I am looking forward to receiving my little, as we would say, my little thalia. But, Mr. President, there's just one other thing I connected to that, which I want to raise, and it is this. You will receive your funds, but then you don't know, what do I do with it? Because, what do you do with it? Because the question is that the opportunities for reinvesting it, you put it in the bank, and you end up getting negative interest. So, you know, if I don't, Mr. President, I don't know what members have been drinking before they got here today, but certainly they're having a happy time. But seriously, I raise that point because I noticed the Prime Minister also went on to speak to unit trusts and the other areas which she's seeking to open up in the capital markets to allow opportunities for people with savings to be able to put them, to invest them in things like the unit trust and so on and so forth. So I just want to caution, and the truth is that I believe the Prime Minister spoke to unit trust in a previous budget. So it is not, it's not entirely new in this area, but I would just wish to hope that the implementation happens a little faster. So, Mr. President, the other thing I would say in that area is that we have to make sure that we have strong and robust governance and management of the investments in any unit trust fund. You know, it pained me when we read in the news very recently the situation with with Usain Bolt and what has happened to all of the investments which we had put in a similar type of entity and had placed it there to provide for his retirement, and then it disappears. And too often, we are seeing these things occurring over and over and over, where there's not proper and robust management in this sector. And so I'm just cautioning that we make sure that we have the level of management that is necessary and the governance to ensure that we don't have those issues again in this area. And so, Mr. President, I am happy to vote in favor of this budget. I wish that all of the things that has been outlined and which are proposed will come into fruition, and that in very short order we will see as a country the benefits of all of this increase in activity. And with those few words, Mr. President, I am obliged.
Thank you very much, Senator Durst. Thank you.
Mr. President, I beg to move the suspension of this sitting until after lunch, which I propose will end at 2:35 p.m.
The question is that this sitting be suspended until 2:35 p.m. today. Honourable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The sitting is suspended until 2:35 p.m. today.